Hey, Desi, that's
Hi, how's it
good to
going?
have you here.
Nice to meet you.
So if we go back right to the beginning, I suppose, to when you were first introduced to Irish music and what got you the bug, and
I suppose handy enough, really. The first time I heard Irish music played by a musician, a real old traditional musician, was Tom Gunn did. And the Guns had I was a pal of Brendan Gunn. We went to school together and stuff,
Right.
Tommy's son. And he was learning to play a bit of fiddle at the time. And Tommy was working for the post office. Used to be up and down poles fixing cables and things. I get home. I remember him, the first time I think I heard him play, I must have been around about 13, 14 years age. And we're in the kitchen of the house, and Tommy came in, and Dan and I were sitting there, we're drinking tea or something, and he took the fiddle out. He had the fiddle hanging on the wall. He just took it down, looked into the sort of, the fire. I think it must have been a kitchen area, and sort of played a tune, and played another tune, and then he sort of put the fiddle down and just sort of, big sigh of relief, and hung it back on the wall, and looked around at us and said, "How you boys?" and took the coat off, a big coat and away. That was the first time I heard any traditional music, I think, played live. I think I'd heard it on the radio before, and I'd probably seen bits and pieces, and if you can call the marching bands, as I probably would argue you could, traditional music, I'd been listening to them marching up and down the Lisburn Road since I was no age, and that's probably my very first experiences of traditional music, but in the sense that we understand it to be, it's Tommy Gunn definitely playing the fiddle, and he was a member of, like from time to time as well, he was called into service with the Boys of the Loch. So the Boys of the Loch, when they were in Belfast, used to stay in Guns B&B. And I'm talking about the 60s, the late 1960s, that sort of time. And they would always, every traditional musician coming through Belfast, whether they were performing somewhere like the Ulster Hall or the Dubliners stayed there once, I think I remember. And Tommy would always be invited to the gigs, and we'd take us down with him sometimes to the Ulster Hall or wherever. I've been to a couple of events like that. Dubliners, Bothy, not the Bothy band, but the Boys of the Loch. Because Cathal McConnell was from Tommy's neighbourhood, Derry Gonnelly, Ballinalek, etc., and County Fermanagh. So Cathal would stay there, and Cathal was a great, of course, as you know, brilliant flute player, lovely. And he was the first, what I'd call, really top-notch flute player I heard. And I think his influence remains in my playing. Not in an obvious way, but I really was impressed with his whole musicality. The fact that he didn't seem to he didn't talk about playing the flute as such, he just talked about playing a bit of music. Do you know this tune? Yeah. I think if he put his hand out and his eyes were shut and he grabbed a fiddle, he would have been the same. It's just so his repertoire and his influence on me at the start, when I was about 17, 18, was very, very profound, because he brought me to Dublin, to Coltis, to buy a flute, at that point. And I bought a flute then in Dublin here. A black man, I don't know who the hell I bought it off. Might have been Paul Davis, but it was a roundabout way anyway, and I came back up, and that was me playing the flute. Then I started playing the flute. I'd been playing the whistle a bit after meeting Tommy. I learned the Rattling Bog and a few other tunes when I was about 14 or so. And I was doing classical recorder at a very low level at school. Yeah. And that's where I know Jerry O'Donnell from as well, because Jerry,
he mentioned
the same school as me.
The same thing, yeah.
And we were both playing the recorder, and we played in a wee school band and stuff like that. But the traditional music end of things was another world, so I didn't connect the whistle and the recorder. And I think eventually I started to think the whistle and, this is more me, this is more what I want to do musically than the classical music as such, And
at that time, were you playing just in houses, and we were just playing with the Guns and
that's it, down playing with guns, playing with the Guns
in
houses. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. But no, we're playing in Guns' house. The kitchen in Guns' house was a session where I heard Sean Keane play the fiddle for the first time ever. I heard Cathal playing, Ali Bain, all the Boys of the Loch, Robin Morton singing. There was also like the sessions in Guns' kitchen where there was loads of singing involved as well. Tommy was a great singer and a great step dancer. Wow. He was a total one-man show. he would put the fiddle down and get up and say, right, play an old tune there, and we'd play something, he'd start dancing. We'd dance away.
Brilliant.
And he'd lilt and everything, play the bones, a lot.
Yeah.
It was a total one-man show.
So as you got a little older, did the music progress, or did you end up going to pubs around town, or?
Oh yeah.
And
Well, I think when you were 18 or so, you start going into pubs, and the first sessions I remember in Belfast that I remember going to were in the place called the Owl House.
Yeah.
And that was up the Falls Road.
Falls Road, Albert Street or something.
Yeah, Albert Street, the bottom part of the Falls Road. It was always Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, real animation to the point of, hysteria.
Yeah.
People screaming and shouting, but there was always music in the background. Quite a few banjo players, as I remember it.
Yeah.
Because you could hear the banjo over the racket.
Aye.
But that's where I started playing tunes, and you could get a few pints, and the Owl House, and then down to the Rotterdam, down to Pat's Bar and the Docks.
Yeah.
And there used to be a crowd of musicians then that went under the sort of the umbrella name of Nabukali. There was Dermy Diamond, Andy Dixon. I think Dave DeShannon was involved a bit in it. He was and Tara Bingham at that point. They were all Nabukali. Nabukali was sort of people. John, what's his name again now? John Parkinson. And Sammy Weir playing the boron. Yeah. And when I think about Nabukali, and I think of the people who played in it, people talk about, society in the North being sort of, split down religious lines, I look at that bunch of people, and they were, English, from the Unionist background, Protestant background, and Catholic. Yeah. There was all a bunch of people who liked traditional music. And then we all used to find out where the flagcule was and head off in a bus or something. Yeah. And that was just one group of people. So it was sort of like a loose connection of different. I would come in and play with them the odd time, and somebody else would come in. And I think then the next stage for me was sort of getting out of the Belfast scene and that started for me by going to college, in the teacher training college, St. Joseph's. I went there. It was my undergraduate sort of experience. And there I met musicians in from Fermanagh, Cavan, Barney Galligan from Kilnalek and Cavan. He was a bouzouki player, a really good player, a flute player as well. John Henry up from County Antrim. Who's Martin? God, I can think of so many names. Paddy O'Neill, notably, from the Moy in County Tyrone, who became a big pal of mine. Yeah. And we used to play music all over around the place up the Falls Road. Yeah. And we'd go to the Moy and Lurgan, various other places.
In the context of what was going on at the time, can you remember it being difficult to get into pubs and or to get across town or how did the music, was it, did you feel like that there was any danger or anything?
Oh yeah.
It was a dangerous pursuit to be out in evenings and kind of in pubs and whatnot.
Well, I mean, at that time in Belfast, I remember, all right, I did explain to you there that the people who played the music probably came from, some of them may well have been, there was no discussion about whether they were unionist or nationalist or whatever, but some of them certainly came from unionist backgrounds. Yeah. But all the sessions that I remember in Belfast, if we start going out towards Comber and various other places, then you're in a slightly different ball game. But in Belfast itself, all the sessions happened in areas which were conspicuously nationalist and Republican, all of them. Yeah. In my memory, I don't remember ever going to a session up the Shankill Road or anything like that. But I do remember people that might have came from that community surreptitiously being involved in the sessions. Yeah. Up the Falls Road in the Old House, and maybe across over in the lower part of the Antrim Road. Most of the areas that I remember in Belfast and down the Short Strand, Kelly's in the Short Strand, Kelly's Cellars in the centre of town, and Tom Kelly himself that owned the Kelly's in the Short Strand was a real big fan of traditional music. Yeah, played the boron himself, made up songs, a real, and very encouraging character, very magnanimous, great host, great man altogether. And he would always make you very welcome. But his pub was like some sort of military bunker. There was cameras all around it. There was big gates all around it, because it was facing out onto the lower Newton-Ayres Road, and the Newton-Ayres Road, very seriously loyalist area.
Yeah.
I won't even say unionist, but loyalist to me implies unionists that are inclined to be violent from time to time.
Yeah.
So this in a working class area, working class as well. That's another thing to be aware of. You know, there's a sense of danger there, and you could be in danger from these people invading the Short Strand, as they did.
Yeah.
And there was pitched battles there regularly. So Tom was very aware of, and I was aware of. You know, you'd go in, you'd have a couple of pints, you'd relax, and then before you leave, maybe 9:30 at night, you start thinking, Jesus, I've got to go out. And I've got to walk onto that lower part of the Union so over that bridge back into town, up the Armour Road home. And I mean, I was a student at the time, and lots of us were trying to save money. Stupid, you know. Instead of getting a taxi from a safe, and you had to be careful to get a taxi from a safe taxi service. Yeah. You know, that you wouldn't be driven off into some coven, you know, and murdered, you know. But those things did go through your mind, you know. So we went round, you'd come out and go over the bridge, up the Armour Road, trying to save a few bob, but literally, it was running the gauntlet. You know, you had these lonely streets, and you were walking about to get to your home. And I remember feeling really, you know, vulnerable, but at the same time, God, I was a very good runner at that stage, you know, certainly very good. I could move. Yeah. And at that time, remember, I don't know if you remember it, but you probably wouldn't, you know, but we were given advice at school and at college that if a car slowed up behind you, you know, you run across the front of it, past the driver, because it will be the passenger that's going to shoot you. Yeah. You know, and I thought, God, and that advice was in the Irish News, and you know, God, it was such.
You couldn't imagine your own
kids. You can't imagine your own. It's and you go, you sort of laugh and snigger, but the laughing and sniggering was sort of a form of protection. Yeah. You know, to mentally sort of make yourself strong enough to live in this type of, you know, stressful environment, I think. Yeah. And I remember thinking, like, you know, well, you know, just the dream of heading off. Every time there was the slightest hint of a flaw, usually if it was too far south, it would be a bit too far. Ennis would be the absolute furthest you'd go, you know. Yeah. Otherwise, below that, you start feeling you were in the Mediterranean, you know. So you got to Ennis, and you know, the Fleadh Nua. It was, I remember that years, the early 70s, the late 60s, early 70s. The Fleadh Nua was like being in a, you know, finding some sort of Tiernan and Og, you know. Yeah. You go down the road and people wanted to see you, they were happy to see you. Oh, you're from the north, great stuff, you know. Come in and they were even more surprised to discover you played a bit of traditional music. And you play traditional music up there, do you? Oh, yeah. You know, but it is as if it was like, you know, the impression was if you're from the north, how could you possibly know anything about Irish traditional music? Yeah. And yet, when I look back at it now, like, sure, look, it was like everywhere. There was people playing this music, you know, everywhere in Ireland, really. And some places had a higher profile than others, and that's the way it was. And we were certainly attracted to Sligo, Fermanagh, Donegal, down to Clare. You know, there's no doubt about it. There was a magic, you know, about going south, getting in a car and just driving south.
I remember that feeling myself.
Getting over the border, laying at Butler's Bridge, County Cavan, spread out. Like little fathers supply them with spears, you know. It was really unbelievable. I remember drinking cider in a pub in Butler's Bridge in Cavan, having got through, because whenever there was those loyalist strikes, it was the first, I'm probably digressing here seriously, but a few of us decided to go to the Fleadh in Ennis, the Fleadh Nua. But the loyalists, these UVF gangs and stuff, had put up blocks on the M1 near Armagh, outside Lurgan, Portadown, that area. So we're driving down, we've seen these boys that looked, you know, the part, with the trench coats and the whole business, standing with sticks and stuff, and it could have been guns, God knows. I think it was sticks. There's a fella called P.V. O'Neill, who's at school with me, and at that time we were out of school, we were first year students and stuff. He was driving a car. Another guy called Marcus Donnelly, I can remember his name, Mark Heathwood. There's about 5 of us in the car. So I said, well, we'll do a U-turn here and we'll go back. This is looking to... So at that point, I said, put the boot down, because the barricade wasn't completely across the road. Just PV put the boot down, says, close your eyes, off we go, bang. And we went straight through it. Yeah. And I remember, you know, going through the barricade and they hear the howls and the boys in the back seat with the fingers out, you know. And it was true, but I mean, when you think of it, it's like something out of a film.
Yeah.
You couldn't make it up. And I'm not making it up, honestly. Even though I have been known to make things up. I'm not making that one up. And we just headed for the border. And that was the big Butler's Bridge experience and down to the Fla. And it was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
But even the brilliant, just... If
all you played was the border.
The only tune you ever played was Dingle Regatta. After that, you were happy anyway.
I know, yeah. But even through all that, the scene was really good.
Vibrant,
it was the best of musicians and the best of
absolutely
music. And that influence, that Fermanagh influence, it was a big thing in Belfast. Taking tunes back and all of that.
It would have been a big thing, that Fermanagh repertory. But I mean, I had got a lot of those tunes. Well, Sean Corcoran collected tunes down in Fermanagh, and he was there a lot. Sean did a lot of work on
Jerry mentioned he was collecting songs,
and he collected. And Sean, of course, is a pal of mine.
Yeah.
And we let me hear tapes of Mick Hoy. I would go and see Mick Hoy, Eddie Duffy before. Eddie Duffy was very old, you know. But I have a couple of tapes of him. Sean would have made some recordings of Cal McConnell used to go to see Eddie all the time.
Yeah.
Bought him a flute one point. I don't know if Jerry mentioned that one. He bought Eddie a flute. We were down there sitting waiting. I think it's 3 or 4 of us there. Jerry might have been there. I might have been there. And Cal presented Eddie with this flute. I said, "Oh, jeez, that's lovely." He had big, huge hands, you know, and a hat. And Eddie must have been about 91 or so. He was an old man. I said, "Oh, God, that's great." And Cal said, "Now, Eddie, that'll be a great flute. You'll find it very handy." He says, "Oh, jeez, I will." And Eddie took it off into the kitchen, and you could hear him swishing the water from the tap down the flute, you know. So that's just going well now. And Pat Kells, we're all sitting there. Oh, we're sitting there with bottles of almond oil, you know, looking after the instrument, you know. And Eddie's water. It's only an old flute, you know. And away he went, but a great, you know, lovely, big, solid player. And he played tunes he described as reels, but they were definitely Highlands. You know, they were because of the rhythm.
Yeah.
And the foot going like that. Him and Mick. Dum da da dum da da dum da da la di da di da da la, you know.
Yeah.
I said, "That's a great reel." I said, "Yeah, it's a reel." But you know, they almost Highlanded every reel, particularly Eddie. All the reels were Highlanded, you know, in the Donegal manner.
It's funny
similar, you know.
That repertoire of Fermanagh tunes and all is still played around Belfast to this day, you know, in the sessions.
Oh yeah, great tunes.
It's kind of, they've hung around, you know, as good tunes do, you know. It's kind of...
No, they're really simple, you know. But you could, because they're so simple, you can do little bit. You can improvise with them a bit, you know.
Yeah.
Not so as you'd notice, not deliberately hacking them with bits, but you know, they just lend themselves to that. Some of those tunes like the Piper on Horseback and the 3 Scones of Boxty. Yeah. They're just great. They're like trance-like, you know.
Yeah. They're made for the flute too.
Yeah, they are. They're definitely. Well, they all come from Eddie Duffy and Mick Hoy, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, Cal was the conduit for me most of the time, you know. No doubt about it. And Gary might agree with that, and Jerry too, no doubt.
Yeah. Some man. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's a good character. A very musical man. Full stop. Just I see him just as an embodiment of just sort of some sort of ethereal, fairy-like musician. You know? Fairy-like, Faery. You know? Let's get that right.
So who apart from the Guns, who would have been your, and Cathal McConnell, say, was there anyone else around Belfast that would have had a...
Well, God, I mean, all those musicians that I mentioned, like Tara, Dermy, Sammy Weir, etc. I found the way they played, and a fellow called Spoolie Kelly played the guitar behind them. Ben Gunn himself, Ben played the fiddle. But that was a core of people that I would have known in Belfast. Andy Dixon, like really.
Andy was great.
Deirdre Shannon, Kieran Carson was part of that scene as well, Deirdre was a great player, as you know, and is a great player still. And I think that Andy Dixon is maybe one of the least, commented upon musicians that was, I think was very influential on my view of way of playing music.
Yeah.
Because he had such a sense of lyricism. And a weird, tricky, and yet when you looked at Andy playing, he didn't look virtuosic at all.
Yeah.
He was the guy behind doing all the stuff, the double stopping, the bits of wee throw in harmonies, the little sort of tricky rhythmic, hints. And I thought he was just a great player.
He was great, fantastic.
And he was a great player,
His influence still shines through.
I think so, yeah.
Even my generation and younger, Andy was very kind to everyone.
Andy's a very good man and a great fun and very interesting guy. He collected seeds of odd plants and he was a botanist. That was his day job part of the time as well.
Yeah, very interesting man.
Very. But his music was apparently he played as a session man on Beatles records and stuff.
I heard that.
And the guitar apparently when he lived in England.
Yeah. Fantastic.
So there's other people there's other people I can think, but I think Cathal, of the slightly older crowd, that Cathal, Andy, people like that, but I really loved the music that all my contemporaries played, and Jerry, including Jerry O'Donnell, Gary Hastings, Frankie Kennedy. We were all part of the same little crowd that sort of hung out and travelled together from time to time places, So there really we were all contemporaries, and we all did share the same space. So I would say, listen, any one of those names you could care to mention would have certainly had a bearing in my music. And then we were listening to the Bothy Band, we were listening to Paddy Glecken, we were listening to various people. When you come across a good musician that would come into your path, well, you just couldn't avoid them.
Yeah.
And
developing on what you were talking about there earlier, in the north, that there was a lot of music going on. It wasn't just Belfast either. There was the surrounding areas, and there was some fantastic music going on in Armagh and Tyrone and with the Haydens and the whole way around
absolutely.
the lot.
And I would go to meet people. And with Paddy, I did a lot of running around Tyrone. And we did a famous trip across the border one time. We skirted the border. Playing music.
Skirted the border?
Yeah.
It sounds like a story.
Doesn't it? We skirted the border all the way from County Louth, from Dundalk, right over to Donegal. And a moment I remember very well of that is my first connection with Jerry O'Connor in Dundalk, Jerry's a good pal. And again, his mother's collection and that music around Dundalk and the O'Connor family were I'd say they're fundamentally sort of an influence on me as well, And certainly just big music influence. And I remember Jerry was about 16, he was a bit younger. He still is a bit younger than me, Because he would he hasn't caught up and overtaken me, like you sometimes think that way. But Jerry came out on a motorbike and Paddy and I were hitchhiking outside of Dundalk, heading for some obscure part of Cavan, like Shercock or something like that, Jerry stopped. There's a session tonight on Mark's Bar, you boys. He didn't know us very well. Would you be interested? You're carrying, I said, all right, yeah, sure. So we got the two of us onto his wee motorbike, and into Dundalk. No helmets, nothing. Just cowboys. So that's the first time I played in Mark's Bar in Dundalk.
And it was
with the O'Connors and Jerry. And
it was a haven at that time. Oh,
God, it was, yeah. And the big connection then with Dundalk, and I lived in Omeath for quite a long while.
That's right, yeah.
And I was playing music in Dundalk and McManus's for many years, and I think Big Tom Mulligan had a pub in Black Rock at that stage.
That's right. Yeah.
Before he moved to Dublin, and Jerry and I used to be fixtures in there most of the Saturday nights. Yeah. So that was all good. That's all after That's after the Belfast years, like really.
Yeah. And you ended up in Brittany as well.
Yeah, but Brittany, I went to live there to work with this sort of, there was a play basically about the Santiago de Compostela pilgrimage.
Yeah.
And I'd met this guy called Eric Liorzu, who's a Breton musician. That he conceived the whole musical journey, and he said, there was points of departure for the pilgrims from various parts of Ireland, even up as far as north of Dundalk. Of course, St James's Gate, Dublin, evidently. Anywhere you had St James, anything, that was a point of departure for the pilgrimage to Santiago. Wow. Went from there to Plymouth or Portsmouth, and then down to the coast of Spain. I forget the name of the place, but that was a connection with Brit. That was why I was into Breton music before that, and I enjoyed the fest-nos and the dancing, and I had a big connection with France because of my wife and stuff and all the rest of it. So I was always heading to France generally every summer. So we got the opportunity to go and live in Brittany because of this. So I stayed there for 2 years. So to do that, to work as a musician with this play, to teach a bit of music and teach a bit of English in a school in Carré, and to allow my two sons at that point to become, fluent in French as well, and be bilingual, And so I stayed there 2 years, played a lot of Breton music on the clarinet, still do that a bit, still play with fest-nos in the summer now with a couple of pals over there. Yeah. And I think that's been a big part of my life, the whole connection with Brittany, and on a very, very, bottom feeder level, not in the high level stage performance, but when I left the play about Santiago, which involved Spanish musicians, Breton musicians, and me, and a guy called Hoppy Hopkins, a boron player, who lives in Brittany, is still there, and we just basically made music to go along with this story of a pilgrimage with a couple of actors. Yeah. And that we did, then we toured right down through France and followed the route of the pilgrimage along to Santiago. Yeah. And that was the end of it then. So that at least gave me the opportunity to live in France and to stay there and to earn money and be able to rent and live there with a family. Yeah. So that was 2 years, and then I came back here to Ireland after that, back to Limerick to study, basically, and do a PhD then with me all and John Morgan, and so that's how I ended up back in Limerick. I didn't never think I'd be I'm still living in Limerick. So that's how I landed there. Yeah, I'm sure Limerick's glad to have you. I don't know. Well, it's good enough. I'm enjoying it. Yeah. And there's some good music there too, of course. There's good music everywhere. That's great. So you've got to find the people and the personalities that you can sort of relate to, and they're everywhere, really. Do
you miss being on the road with Cran? And gigging that way, or do you
I've always been. I liked being on the road, and I liked doing gigs in the right circumstances. But I was always the back of my mind resistant to it somewhere, and I didn't want to be a full-time professional musician ever. And I think, that's reflected in the way what I've tried to do. So the fact that I've been involved in academia and teaching. I'm a teacher. I did teach second level history in a school for 2 years in Larne. That's another story. And then that was my very first job as a teacher in Larne when I was about 21, 22.
Were you playing? You were playing traditional music. Was there ever any music around Larne?
Oh, there was, yeah. God, There's a famous crowd from Larne that used to travel to all the flahs. Joe Stewart, Desi Stewart, Martin Robinson, a great banjo player. Jim McCauley, fiddle player, and they were all the Larne boys, and they played in the town hall bar in Larne. No. And they were again an eclectic mix of. There was no religious difficulties there at all. It was all about people who liked music.
Yeah, it's a misconception that people have. That it's one crowd doing one thing and one crowd.
Total misconception.
Especially with traditional music, But it's interesting to hear that there was music being played in Larne at that time, which would be really considered,
People come in, sit around, and like anywhere in the town hall bar, but I didn't go to that much because I just worked in Larne. I lived in Belfast still, so, And Larne, you know, it's a grim enough spot in many ways, but, you know, there was a bunch of good people there that were very good musicians, and they were full of crack and yarns. And
what would they have had a... I'm trying to think, is there any... Would they have local tunes or...
I think that, I think there's a few, Yeah, a few. I think there's some of them in that Bannock's book. I don't know who collected them or who put them, but I can think of a couple of a hornpipe with the name Alistair MacDonald on it, Alistair, and this was reputedly collected from a fiddle player who lived in Larne. I'll have to look into that, and maybe somebody more worthy could check it than I. But I think there was,
I think Nigel Boulier collected a load of tunes out.
He did. I knew Nigel as well, Nigel and Diana. They were regulars, and I'd be out and playing at Baron Fealties in Bangor from time to time as well. It was a good spot. He said there's a lot of places that are, and down in the Archbishop in Comber, there was a great pub there for music. Big Ernie Swain, Dennis Calvert. Do you know those people?
I know.
Dennis was a huge man altogether. He's dead now.
Yeah, that's right.
Played the whistle, and he started a cultist group in the most unlikely part of the Arts Peninsula. You know, he was really into music. Nobody argued with him. He was about 6'7".
That's right.
You know, it's big Dennis. Very gentle giant. He'd been out working on the boats in Iceland. He looked the part, by God. He looked like a big Viking. And he was a real nice man. And there's music, and there's later, you could scratch any surface, and there's people doing it. And for the right reasons, you know, just under the
radar.
You know, all right, we've both been involved in professional music, and we know what it is, and your profile automatically goes up when you've made a few records, and you've travelled a bit, and you've done the rest of it, and you've made efforts to, you know, professionalise what you do, and it's fair enough. It's great. But I mean, there's a whole lot of people under that just keep on ticking away. They're ticking away, and they're doing it, you know. And they're all part of the, you know, the rich tapestry of traditional folk music.
Well, there was a poor man, to work he was unable, glory hallelujah, oh Rajarum. And he begged all the crumbs from the rich man's table, glory hallelujah, oh Rajarum. Oh Rajarum, oh Rajarum, skiddery wink a doodle skiddery wink a doodle glory hallelujah, oh Rajarum. Well, the poor man died, he went up to heaven, glory hallelujah, oh Rajarum. And he boozed with the angels to 11:30, glory hallelujah, oh Rajarum. Oh Rajarum, oh Rajarum, skiddery wink a doodle skiddery wink a doodle glory hallelujah, oh Rajarum. Well, the rich man died, he didn't do so well, glory hallelujah, oh Rajarum. For the devil he came up and dragged him down to hell, glory hallelujah, oh Rajarum. Oh Rajarum, oh Rajarum, skiddery wink a doodle skiddery wink a doodle glory hallelujah, oh Rajarum. The first thing that he called for was a brandy and a sodium, glory hallelujah, oh Rajarum. But the devil he soon told him it wasn't a hotelium, glory hallelujah, oh Rajarum. Oh Rajarum, oh Rajarum, skiddery wink a doodle skiddery wink a doodle glory hallelujah, oh Rajarum. Well, the next thing that he called for was some water to console him, glory hallelujah, oh Rajarum. But the devil he just called out, shovel on the coleum, glory hallelujah, oh Rajarum. ho Roger rum, ho Roger rum. Skiddery wink a doodle skiddery wink a doodle glory hallelujah, ho Roger rum. Well, the story that I'm telling is the scriptures they is telling 'em. Glory hallelujah, ho Roger rum. And if yous don't believe me, well, yous all can go to hellium. Glory hallelujah, ho Roger rum. Ho Roger rum, ho Roger rum. Skiddery wink a doodle skiddery wink a doodle glory hallelujah, ho Roger rum.